Boom! Welcome back, guys. How we doing? How we feeling? Super pumped, super jazzed, extremely excited to have you here for chapter number 3 in section number 1 or module 1 of this course, Intro to Branding. And in this section, we're going to explore the brand riff. Now, I get it. It's super easy to believe that there's this insane difference between strategy and creativity. For example, we often think of strategists as those analytical left-brainers, right? The doctor, the lawyer, the engineer, etc. And then on the flip side, we think of those free-flowing creatives like the musician, the painter, the designer. We often think of those individuals as the creative, free-flowing right-brainers. Now here's the deal. When the analytical and the creative energies, they start to flow apart and one overpowers the other, so analytical energies being more powerful than the creative energies and vice versa, what ends up happening is a rift occurs. And as a result of this rift between the creative energies and the analytical energies, well, a brand gap forms. Brand gaps, they are bad news, like bad news, like the worst news a brand could have. Okay, not the worst brand of news could have, but it's up there with being some of the worst news a brand could have. And the reason being is because a brand gap can lead to the failure of the most brilliant strategies or the flop of the most remarkable creative initiatives. Worst of all, the separation of strategy from creativity and vice versa, it's 9 times out of 10 going to divide the company from its customers. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by this is that if you don't have that connection or that synergy between creativity and strategy, now all of a sudden the two are competing for one another, and there's going to be this disconnect between your brand and customers, because some customers are going to maybe really connect with the analytical energies of the brand, whereas the other side of your customer base may only connect with the creative side of your brand. So when you don't have those two working together, now all of a sudden they're competing and you're only connecting with so much of your target audience, and that can lead to an uncharismatic brand, which is something you want to avoid. Because a brand that is purely analytical, that's going to be a brand that's a little bit boring. Alternatively, a brand that's purely creative all the time, that might be a little bit overwhelming. Remember that age-old saying that communication is key? Look, that rings true yet again. As cliche as that saying is, it is true. And in the case of brand gaps, that communication is going to be the solution to bridging the gap between your creative side and your analytical side. And frankly, that communication you create between the analytical side of your brand and the creative side of your brand, that is going to be the fastest solution or the bridge to your brand gap. Now, there's a ton of different solutions that you could take in order to bridge your brand gap, but there's definitely no one-size-fits-all solution. I know. You're like, yes, this is the solution. It's gonna fix all of our problems. Unfortunately not. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, and every brand gap is super unique, and it's gonna require a little bit of experimentation until the right-brainers and the left-brainers find a way to communicate seamlessly throughout your brand and your organization. You might be now asking yourself, is this really worth the effort? This brand gap is like, analytical people and creative people, they don't mesh. Is it really worth the effort? Absolutely, every single time it's worth the effort. In fact, your brand and other brands that work to bridge this brand gap, chances are they're going to be pretty surprised by the magic that is created, the way in which customers respond to a brand that has a perfect balance between its analytical side and its creative side. Now, I get it. You might be sitting there asking yourself, can I get an example of this? I got you. Here's the best example of what it's like to bridge a brand gap. It's like giving a deaf person a hearing aid for the first time. Imagine all the things they've been missing out on by not being able to hear the world around them. Now give them that hearing aid and they can hear all the different things going on in the world, and suddenly their entire perspective has changed. It's the same thing with a brand gap. When you give them that hearing aid, that seamless communication between the analytical and creative sides of your company, now all of a sudden you're giving them the opportunity to experience your brand from an entirely new perspective that is even more cohesive. All right, dude, where's the catch? Okay, in some cases, it can feel like a brand has tried everything. We've tried this, we've tried that, and we just can't find a way to get the right brainers and the left brainers to work together. I give up. Don't give up. And while that situation could be true, chances are it's only true for a brand that has given up on trying to bridge those creative and analytical energies, or has just continued to take the same approach day in and day out. Now, one of the most effective ways to get both types of people, the right brainers and the left brainers, to work together is to get them involved in one another's process. Now, I get it. Whoa. We're going to get right brainers doing analytical things, and we're going to get analytical people doing creative things. This has got to be a joke, man. Hear me out. The goal isn't to have all of the right brainers start doing all analytical tasks all the time and all of the left brainers doing all creative tasks all the time. The goal is to just get each of those groups, the left brainers and the right brainers, involved in one another's process just enough so that each of them have an opportunity to experience what the other person does. And when they have this opportunity to experience what the other person does, not only are they going to feel important because they're being included in the process that's being used to make decisions, but they're also going to have an opportunity to learn why the other's role is important. Then all of a sudden, you have a mutual respect for each of them. And now communication between the two can happen in a more seamless and free-flowing way. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense, and you might now be asking yourself, okay, well, how do we actually get the left brainers and the right brainers involved in one another's processes? Well, one of the best approaches to this is really just doing workshops with them. Do a workshop where you have the left brainers and the right brainers engage with one another. If you don't want to do workshops, you could also do brainstorming sessions, but it's going to be really important that you get everybody involved in the brainstorming sessions, which sometimes can be hard because you'll just have people that sit there and go, they don't say anything. And not everybody always wants to say anything all the time, so it's a delicate balance between encouraging and making people feel like they can say something in a brainstorming session versus forcing them to say something in a brainstorming session. While workshops and brainstorming sessions are definitely one of the easiest ways to get left brainers and right brainers involved in one another's process, it's not the only way to get them involved in one another's process, but it's definitely one of the most effective ways to accomplish it. Okay, you got it. You've pinpointed that brand gap, and you've got the left brainers and you've got the right brainers working together, and they're on the same page. So now that you've done this, it's time to bridge that brand gap once and for all. And sometimes this could mean rebranding. Let's take a look at Lego. It rebrands so successful that it's been called the most significant turnaround in corporate history. Wait, you mean to tell me that Lego was on the verge of collapse? Yeah, unfortunately, Lego was on the verge of collapse. At almost 100 years old, Lego had grown boring and outdated. And by 2003, they were on the brink of collapse. Things only worsened as Lego fell out of favor with their target audience, kids. Crazy, right? How can you fall out of favor with kids? Kids love everything. I mean, Lego must have been really close to the end at this point in time in their history. And they almost did. They almost fell off and ceased to exist. Can you imagine a world without Lego? But guess what? There's some good news. The executive team saw this opportunity for a brand extension. And what did they do? They said, yeah, this is a good opportunity. Let's pounce on it. So they did. And what did they do? They took Lego digital. And you might be thinking to yourself, that was obvious. Well, at the time, it wasn't. Ultimately, it ended up working, and they were able to re-engage their customers, kids, and now they're considered the Apple of toys. And this is due to their impressive growth and insane popularity. I mean, just look at this increase in revenue from $900 million all the way up to $7 billion. Okay, so there you have it, guys. That is a look at what happens when there is a rift between strategy and creativity, and why bridging the gap between the two is incredibly important for brand success. Up next, we're going to take a deep dive into the bland brand and why it's important to have a brand that is charismatic and engaging with your customer base. Why? Because if you have a brand that is bland or unengaging, you're going to fall out of favor with your target audience just like Lego did. And we don't want to have that happen because we would like to avoid having a rebrand or having to do some crazy brand extension in order to bring the brand back to life. So without further ado, let's hop into it. All right, we've already been talking about it a ton, but communication is everything. And when a brand does a terrible job at communicating, they're going to find that nobody is listening. Why? Because the way in which they're sharing their message is boring. Okay, but why? Why is it boring? Well, in other words, it's because customers see the brand as bland. Alternatively, brands that communicate in fun and engaging ways, they are considered charismatic. And why would it be important to have a charismatic brand? Well, one of the advantages to having a charismatic brand is that it becomes sticky with customers. And when you have a brand that's sticky with customers, it creates this excitement and anticipation that keeps customers engaged and coming back to the brand day in and day out. Now, long story short, brands that communicate in clear, concise, and engaging ways, they transcend that brand gap that we talked about a little bit earlier, and they delight customers. Now, again, we've touched on customer delight a ton, and you might still be asking yourself, what is the big deal about customer delight? Okay, the reason why customer delight is so important is because it's every successful brand's secret sauce. And why is it every successful brand's secret sauce? Well, it's because delighted customers create this natural barrier between their favorite brands and the competition. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by natural barrier between competition? That feels super technical. Another way to think about this, or a way to break this down and make it a little bit more simple of a concept to understand, is that if you have customers that are delighted or find delight in your brand, chances are they've had such good experiences with your brand over time that they are now these super fans of your brands that don't want to go anywhere. They're going to jump through every possible hoop they have to in order to buy your brand. And now when you have competitors in the space, what happens is the competitors have to provide as much delight and as many great experiences as your brand has provided to your customers in order to steal them from you. So that's why focusing on customer delight is so important, and why it creates this natural barrier between your brand and competitors. So one of the most important things to do is stop trying to please everybody and focus on becoming a charismatic brand. Why? Because if you're focusing on trying to please everybody, chances are you're trying to do too many things at once, and your brand is filled with clutter and becoming consuming. Alternatively, if you focus on one little niche and how to be charismatic in that niche, you're going to delight customers and be a way more exciting brand to engage with. Now, the action steps to creating a charismatic brand, they're pretty simple. First, you're going to take a stance. And what do I mean by this? It means you're going to pick one area, one niche, and you're going to take a stance in that area and say, hey, we own this space. This is where we dominate as a brand. And after you've done that, you're going to want to be a little bit wild. Don't be afraid to get a little bit creative or a little bit crazy with your brand. Why? Because brands that get a little wild, they're fun. There's a little bit of mystery to them. And on top of that mystery, there's a little bit of unpredictability. And unpredictability, when not taken too far, can be a super engaging way to keep customers on their toes and excited about what comes next. After you've gotten a little wild and taken a stance, you're going to want to become dedicated to aesthetics. And what do I mean by this? What are aesthetics, and why is it important to be dedicated to them? Aesthetics are really the look and feel of the brand. Is this a design that looks clean, professional, is something I would hang on my wall at home, right? Brands that are dedicated to aesthetics just feel better. And brands that feel better are going to attract or draw customers to them much quicker because they stand out and they're refreshing when compared to all the clutter and noise of the market. Finally, what you'll want to do to become a charismatic brand is find a way to become a constant cultural topic that is frequently generating conversations, right? One of the brands that does a great job of this is Nike, right? They're constantly being talked about in the news. They're mentioned in hip hop music, etc. That's going to be your final goal. How can you become a brand that is so interesting that you become a cultural icon like Nike, like Coke, like Play-Doh? Play-Doh maybe is a bad example, but it was definitely a cultural icon back in the 2000s when every kid was talking about it. Long story short, become a cultural topic by becoming an icon within your industry so that people are having conversations around your brand day in and day out. When you have people, or when you have customers that are talking about your brand day in and out and frequently amongst not only their friend groups but everyone else that they know, you have a brand that has no marketing costs, because now all of a sudden everybody's just talking about you all the time, so you don't need to spend as much money on marketing. Now, if you think that building a charismatic brand is this insane time suck that's crazy hard to measure, you wouldn't be the first, and I wouldn't fault you for it. But I got some bad news. That assumption, it's not too far from the truth. And that's because building a remarkable brand, it is a time-consuming activity. However, something that's important to note about taking the effort to build a remarkable brand is that brands that pursue the goal of becoming the most charismatic brand in their space, they're going to enjoy a couple key benefits. Firstly, that is, they're going to command way more market share. And once you have more market share, you can command higher prices. And ultimately, that leads to your brand becoming uncommoditizable. So the advantages of becoming a charismatic brand are as follow, right? You're going to, 1, have more market share, 2, be able to command higher prices, and 3, be uncommoditizable. Now, over on the right here, we've got a couple example of brands. We've got the Dollar Shave Club and we've got Panasonic. Now, let's take a look at the Dollar Shave Club, right? They're a fantastic example of a generic business with a charismatic brand. Take a look at their past marketing campaign, right? It says Supreme Moisture and Glide. Gel, yeah? Notice how they use a little wordplay to engage and excite the customer. If this old advertisement from the Dollar Shave Club isn't enough to show you how charismatic their brand is, check out this old video from a past marketing campaign.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis. And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and polio. Looking good, pop up! Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are gonna ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're gonna stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
I know karate, I know jiu-jitsu, I drive like a gangster when I'm coming to see you, see you, see you, see you.
Alright, y'all, I hope you enjoyed that video and found it a little bit amusing. But real talk, were you guys able to identify any of the 4 elements of a charismatic brand? I certainly was. 2 of the biggest that stood out to me was, one, that at the beginning of the video, they took a stance by telling you how great their razor blades were. And 2, they got a little creative or a little wild with that video. Now that we've taken a little bit of a deep dive look into one of the most charismatic brands out there, the Dollar Shave Club, take a look at Panasonic. They're a super exciting company, right? They have consumer electronics and they're doing solar power. Both things that are really interesting and have a lot of potential in the long term. However, they're falling short, in my opinion, because their brand is bland and it's unengaging, and that's showcased here by this advertisement below the Dollar Shave Club. It says, Panasonic, go solar with one of America's most trusted companies. So how is Panasonic missing the mark with this advertisement? One, they're not really taking a stance. They're just kind of making a claim that they're a trusted company. On top of that, they haven't really gotten wild. Now, for Panasonic, they probably wouldn't want to get too wild because of the market that they're in and the niche that they're targeting. But it wouldn't hurt if they added a little bit of a creative flair to their advertisement. Third, they don't really seem to care about aesthetics. I mean, just look at this advertisement, right? It's literally a blue banner with their logo on top, a picture of some random house and some solar panels, and then almost unreadable in the bottom of that is go solar with one of America's most trusted brands. And finally, Dollar Shave Club, we could talk about that video all day. In fact, people are. The Dollar Shave Club approach to marketing was so successful and so culturally relevant that tons of other companies have copied that exact same marketing style. Dr. Squatch's soap is just another example. Alternatively, no one's really talking about Panasonic, and people totally could be. Just because they're a tech company doesn't mean they don't have to be a cultural topic. Take Apple, right? Everybody's talking about Apple all the time and frequently wondering what they're up to. There you have it, guys. Long story short, don't be a bland brand. Why? Because it's boring and nobody's gonna be listening to a brand that isn't engaging and exciting. Therefore, take some time to understand the core differences between a bland brand and a charismatic brand. Maybe make a list of the most charismatic brands and a list of the least charismatic brands. With the list of charismatic brands, figure out all the things that they're doing that make them charismatic. Then take that list of all of the uncharismatic brands and figure out what they're doing that makes them uncharismatic. Afterwards, compare and contrast the two and figure out how you can take your brand to the next level and make it the most charismatic brand in your niche. Until next time, guys, peace. Alright guys, there you have it. Congratulations, you've made it to the last chapter in this module. And this part is going to be all about brand outcomes. And there's tons of exciting companies that are producing intriguing and interesting and unique products every single year. But one of the problems is that they're suffering from a failing brand. In fact, 9 times out of 10, brand failure is going to come from either a lack of knowledge, a lack of charisma, or a lack of consumer trust, or the fact that the brand is just plain bland, aka the brand is boring. Okay, what are some examples of this? A bland brand or a brand that maybe lacks consumer trust? Well, we looked at an example earlier, right? Panasonic, they don't necessarily lack trust, but they're just a boring brand. Other examples of bland brands or brands that maybe are just failing to hit the mark could be like the local lawyer's office in a small town, right? Those brands are typically very average. They all sort of feel the same. And you're like, what's the difference between this lawyer and that lawyer? On top of that, you could even look at like spark plugs for a car, right? In fact, that's an interesting one because there's a lot of opportunity to have an exciting brand around a spark plug company. Not that I really care about spark plugs, but spark plugs are dealing with electricity and you could have all sorts of cool branding around that. Now, here's the deal. We all know great brands when we see them. They stand out from the clutter, right? They're like this North Star that shines bright and commands your attention better than any of the competitors in the space. In fact, some people, myself included, would go as far as to say that great brands are so remarkable that they just call out and speak to them. This is actually a result of personification, and we talked about that in previous videos. Now, the point is that a timeless brand is going to be loved worldwide by customers. And the reason it's going to be loved worldwide by customers is because they've developed this deep sense of trust. And when you have that deep sense of trust with your consumer base, chances are you're going to have become a cultural topic. Now, what is the relationship between being a constant cultural topic and having a deep sense of trust? Well, if you have a deep sense of trust, chances are you have customers that are frequently talking about you because they're very impressed by the experiences that you've provided and they want to tell all of their friends. And okay, you're only telling your friends about brands that you trust. Now all of a sudden your brand has reached scale and all of your target customers have told their friends and their friends are telling their friends, and now all of a sudden everybody's talking about you all of the time. All right, now I want to take a step back and talk about brands that are incredible but plagued by distrust or a poor brand perception. And Uber is unfortunately a great example of this because they are consistently named year over year one of the worst brands. And the gut feeling created by Uber was actually so bad at one point that they replaced their CEO in order to help rebuild their brand image. Let me give you an example of this super quick. So back in the day, there used to be this software engineer named Susan Fowler, and she worked for Uber. And she was a pretty good software engineer working at some of the higher levels. Long story short, she started to experience some sexual harassment from leaders within Uber. And ultimately what ended up happening is she got stalked, she got hacked, all by Uber in order to help her cover up this story that she wrote about how terrible the cultural experience was for her as a woman in that company. Now, regardless of all this effort that Uber has put in, such as firing their CEO and putting in a new one, creating new brand values, etc., they've still been involved in a myriad of scandals that have really placed them in danger of losing market share and caused core customers to ask themselves, is this a company I can trust? What about the most loved brand in America? Take a guess. Try and guess what the most loved brand in America is. Just kidding. Don't even waste your time. It's probably the company that's least on your mind. Now, according to Morning Consult polls, the United States Postal Service is the most loved brand in the United States. Wait, what? Are you surprised? I don't think you should be. And the reason why is because when was the last time you went to the post office and said to yourself, I don't trust this organization. There's no way these guys are going to get my mail to where it needs to go. The last time you said that was probably never. The US Postal Service nails it at least 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10. They are a loved brand with a ton of trust across all of Americans. Okay, I want you guys to take a step back and observe something. Notice how every brand that's super successful and has super fans is a brand that consumers don't think twice about buying from or utilizing a service from. And on top of that, they're a brand that people just can't stop talking about. Well, why? It all comes back to that core pillar, trust. And when it comes to brand success, trust is everything. And if you focus on creating it, you're going to become a cultural topic that your core customer base raves about year over year. Guys, thank you so much for making it to the end of this module and getting through the first chapter of the course. Up next, we're going to dive into the second module of the course, which is where we're going to start to get a little bit more hands-on. And the second module is going to kick off with brand differentiation. We're going to learn how to differentiate your brand from start to finish and become first to customers' minds. See you in the next video. Peace.